What is up, everyone? Welcome back to the channel for the top baits of the month of May. May is one of my absolute favorite times of the year to fish because May is the time of year that the fish sort of get done spawning in a lot of areas of the country. I know my friends from up north, that is probably your number one time of year that they're actually spawning. So I will say some stuff a little bit about my northern friends, of course, because it changes a little bit up there. But for most of us that are in the South, even around the Midwest, Indiana, Ohio, where I grew up, the bass are sort of getting done in the month of May. And this is like the major transition from spawn to summertime haunts. So where do we find the bass this time of year is the big question, because of course they're heading out, and all the bass don't go offshore in a lot of our lakes. Some bass stay shallow, some bass sort of move to the backs of some of the creeks and stuff. So there's a lot of different ways to target fish in the month of May. And of course, the number one way that I like to target them, and one of my favorite bites of the whole season, because it only happens for about a month out of the year, is a shad spawn. Okay, and a shad spawn, just to give you an understanding what a shad spawn is. Shad, of course, are spawning, sort of like the bass spawn. Typically, I think that's the way God made it, is where, hey, the bass spawn, and then right after that, the shad spawn is a great opportunity for those fish to feed back up because they're, at their skinniest point, their weakest point. Then they have that forage to actually eat and feed on in a lot of the shad lakes around the country. And so the thing is, the shad typically spawn at night. So it only happens for a little bit in the mornings, or, okay, I'll tell you this too. So the shad spawn only happens at night a lot of times, but it'll happen a little bit of times in the morning. So when you're targeting it, you're getting the last bit of the shad spawn first thing in the morning. That's why it's so important to get up early. If there's one time a year that I'm not going to miss that morning bite, it is right now. Right now is the time. And so what baits am I going to use to target the shad spawn and the fish that are eating shad is typically white colored baits. Okay, so of course, chatter baits are probably one of my absolute favorite ways to target bass that are on shad spawn. Here's a white one, a 3/8 ounce jackhammer. This is a half. Both of them have a Crush City Freeloader on the back of him. And so the reasons why I like throwing a chatterbait is just super versatile. The cool thing, you obviously have the silver blade, so it looks like another shad that's sort of spawning with it. And then you have obviously the action of the skirt in the Freeloader itself. So for me, where am I going to throw this? I'm throwing this a lot around docks, floating docks. I'm fishing it around green grass, any kind of grass, absolutely hard bottom, like gravel bars and points the shad will spawn on. They'll really spawn about anywhere, but you sort of have to figure out where the bass is. Just because you see a whole bunch of shad spawning does not necessarily mean the bass are there. My suggestion is you start towards the backs of the creeks, because the backs of the creeks are where the bass spawn first. So the shad that are spawning back there, normally the bass are on them. And then you work your way throughout the month of May towards your main lake, because normally the bass will be on the main lake at some point in time in the month of May. And it takes them a little time to get out there, and that's the last of shad spawn. You got to sort of think of it like this. Bass spawn in the shallowest water first. Okay, shallow water, super shallow, because the water temperature is warm enough to the bass to ultimately spawn. The shad will do the same thing. They'll start towards the backs and work their way towards the main. Same thing with the bass. They start towards the backs and the very backs of the creek, because the first one's to spawn, and then you'll have late spawners in the month of May that are spawning on the main lake. So that's sort of think of it like that. They're very similar in that fact if they sort of make that transition. Water temperature though for the shad spawn is probably 70 degrees is perfect. High 60s to 70 degrees is like prime time shad spawn water temperature. So that being said, definitely a chatterbait is one of my favorites, and being able to be versatile and skip that around around bushes or around trees, around docks, is one of my favorite bites. And it only normally happens for about an hour to an hour and a half in the morning, but man, it can be unbelievable. One other bait that's really good on the shad spawn is an accent spinnerbait. This guy right here, this actually just came out of my boat from the last tournament. There was a shad spawn at Lake Eufaula, and this guy right here is just a good spinnerbait to throw. Double willow is what I prefer. There's like a triple shaddy, like a shad spawn spinnerbait that actually is in my line as well. If the water's dirtier, I like a double willow because it has more thump. If the water's cleaner, I actually like a triple blade spinnerbait And that just adds, again, more flash, more drawing power, and if they're visually feeding, a lot of times like they do in the Shad Spawn, I want more flash and more blades. Even times having more than that, 4 or 5 can be really cool. That being said, I do throw like a little bit of a swim bait. This is a 3-inch mare on the back of him. I do slow it down a little bit, and if I want him to speed him up a little bit, I'll actually trim the tail up a little bit to where it doesn't slow that retrieve down too much. But I like a plastic on the back of my spinnerbait. I feel like it gives them something to hold on to. And that's why I'm really big on a spinnerbait on that side of it. This one I'm throwing on my 7-foot 7-1 medium heavy select rod. On the chatterbait rods, I was throwing a 7.3 medium heavy and a 7.0 medium heavy. Typically 6.8 to 1, 7.3 to 1 gear ratio is my preference. I don't like to go too much faster than that because I feel like you could work the bait too fast. That can sort of happen as well. So those are my baits day in and day out for Shad Spawn fishing. You can throw crankbaits. You can throw, you could throw a lot of white jigs. There's a lot of different ways to throw. I mean, I've even caught bass on like, fluke style baits. There's a lot of different ways you can target them. But the thing is, it is one of the most fun bites there possibly is. Okay, so number 2 on the line, which that was sort of 1, even though spinnerbait, chatterbait. I'm gonna go with a buzzbait. Okay, buzzbait is another great bait for Shad Spawn, but it's also a bait that I throw year in and year out. The buzzbait that I throw choice is another Accent product. Accent, my signature series buzzbait right here. You get these in a couple of different tackle stores around the country, some online and some major retailers. So anyway, great buzzbait, absolutely phenomenal, made here in the States, and it is a great sounding buzzbait. So I'm gonna give you guys a couple tips. Right now I have a cleanup crawl on the back of this guy right here, and then I have a toad on this one right here. This one's the finesse, and this one's the regular, as I call it, the regular J. Wheeler Series buzzbait. So different blade size. If they're on smaller bait, I like that smaller buzzbait. You see that? Oh, that squeaking buzzbait. That sucker's so bad. And then, if they're on bigger bait or if there's a lot more wind, that one was tuned in. That was dang tournament ready. Tournament ready buzzer right there. So that's when profile matters, but I'm gonna show you something that I do. So they come in this package just like this guy right here. And let's see here. You can put it, the skirt is loose. Okay, see how that is? The skirt's loose. And so it comes like this way. So that way, if you want to put the skirt on there and have a normal skirted buzzbait, you can do that. You just sort of push it up on there and you're good to go. Or this is what I do a lot of times. So what I did with these guys. So what I'll do is I normally take a pair of side cuts and I'll go in and I'll actually cut this rounded edge right here, and I'll show you what I did. So basically I just did this just a second ago. I'll take a little the sides off of him. So what I did for this is I took the sides. You can see it's not like very scientific, but you get the point of it. You can see I cut the sides of this buzzbait off so where I could push it up over the head of that plastic, and that's how I get to where I can put it above there. So if I want a skirt on there, I just leave it like this. Or if I want to thread a plastic on there, because there is a keeper right there, I can just do that just as well. So that's a great one. But before I forget, so that's personally my one of my favorite ways to fish it. So if I'm fishing with plastic on there, I can do that. Or if I want to put a skirt and a plastic on there, or a skirt, and you just for preference is just a regular skirt, you can do that as well. So that is definitely just like that. So that's definitely a way to go. As far as where am I going to be fishing a buzzbait this time of year, I'm gonna go to the ranch real quick here, and I forgot to do this on the Shad Spawn, but I'll get you guys taken care of on this. So where I'm gonna throw a buzzbait is there's several different things. Okay, you gotta think. For me, my biggest mindset like on a buzzbait is like I can throw this if the wind's up. I can throw a buzzbait all day long this time of year. If there is any wind at all, I want windy banks. And the sun is absolutely fine. I just don't want to, I want to stay away from sunny banks with zero wind, okay? Now, sunny banks with shade pockets, different story, okay? So I'm looking for sunny banks with wind, or banks with wind, period. or shade. Those are the two things that I'm looking for. So depending on where the sun is and in the given day, I'm gonna go here to the map. A lot of times I'm going around some of these flatter areas because these flatter areas right here typically have some sort of like bank grass in those areas. Or, you know, like say the sun's to the north, I think it's the north right here, comes out of the east. You're gonna have like a little bit of shade right here on this western facing bank. Those are the places, any of these steeper banks, you see that right there, it's probably gonna get the sun first. So I'm gonna go slide over here to that bank right there. Okay, or if they're on the main lake, that same thing. Shade is king. It prolongs the shad spawn and it prolongs the bite for a top water. A buzzbait is one of my favorite ways to cover water, but a buzzbait's really, really good just to like figure out where the fish are at. I utilize a buzzbait more so just to sort of get an idea. So if you are in a boat or you're on a pond, you're on a river, like I can cover so much water with a buzzbait that I can sort of figure out, maybe it's not the perfect bait to use for the day, but I can get a bite. Most days in the month of May, I can get a bite on a buzzbait, no matter how tough the fishery is. And that will give me an idea where the fish are set up to where I can slow down. So that's always a tip. So sometimes I go fast and put my trolling motor down, fish fast, get a bite. Okay, they're on shaded banks with wood. Maybe I can slow down and pick it apart with something else so I can run the pattern. So that's the key right there. Now, jumping on the shad spawn and jumping back into the shad spawn, talking about a little bit of what went down there. We're just gonna talk about, you know, here's a major creek right here, okay? So again, when we were talking about the bass and the shad spawn happening, the shad typically and the bass will spawn in the backs of the creeks like this one back in here. They'll be spawning on the stumps, they'll be spawning on these banks. That's where typically it warms up the fastest. As you come to the front of the creek, you know, they're gonna spawn on bluff banks like this guy right here, hard-hitting bluff bank. That's gonna be towards your month of later May is where I'm gonna be focused on areas like that. So start in the backs of the creeks, move yourself forward, look for docks, look for major marinas, look for major points. And in addition to that, the shad will also spawn on these points, like these big flat bars and points like that. They'll get on those places first in the morning. And if they're deeper shad spawns happening, it'll be prolonged a little bit longer because the sun doesn't quite get down to those depths that early. You know what I'm saying? It sort of takes a little bit of time for that sun to get up, where a shallow shad spawn might be gone and the bass ghost you. So tidbits on that. Wanted to give you guys a rundown on like where I'm looking for that as well. Buzz baits, back on the buzz bait side of things, you can go a lot of different ways with it, but yeah, I mean, toad, skirt, toad, skirt, cleanup crawl, a lot of different ways to throw a buzz bait. And I mean, I even throw like, I'll show you this real quick here, just to show you. Reason why I like threading it. Now, I even throw like a mare on there. So if I want a little bit bigger profile, I want like a boot tail, I can do that just as well. Put a little bit of saliva. I needed to give him a little bit more to him. Actually fits really well. Hold on 1 second. Get him set up just like so. It's a little bit crooked, but you get the gist. So, just like that as well. So if I want a little bit bigger profile, I can throw the boot tail on there as well. The only thing I don't like a boot tail, I don't throw it as much on a boot tail, is you will have it ride on its side a little bit more because it doesn't keel as well. The reason why I like a toad and a cleanup crawl is they both have 2 legs, so it helps keel the bait, keel the buzz bait to where it locks it in place. They have equal resistance, where a swim bait, that tail goes back and forth. You can catch them on it, but it's not one, it's gonna wanna ride up on the side a little bit more, so just be ready for that one as well. Okay, so let's go number 3. Is it number 3? Number 3. I'm gonna pick up the good old trusty crankbait. Seriously, one of my favorite things to do is to go cranking offshore. And so I'm picking up a DT10 right now because deep is relative. Offshore cranking is relative. You could be offshore cranking with a DT6, you could be offshore cranking with a DT4, you could be offshore cranking with a DT20, a big giant plug like a 10XD or something like that. It's all relative to where the bass are set up for that time of year. Typically, they'll set up shallower and like right as they get done post spawn, right adjacent to some of the places that they were gonna set up at 8 to 12 feet of water first. That's why IDT10 is one of my favorite crankbaits. This is like a mustard color. That's one of my, it's really good when the water's a little bit more stained. And the thing about a crankbait is they don't necessarily have to be schooled up. I could be cranking rocks with this. I could be cranking rocky banks, rock transitions, just gravel points. They don't have to be schooled up, but they do get a little bit deeper. Once the shallow bite is done in the month of May, I'm looking to try to sort of go on to the next best thing. And typically going off the bank a little bit is the best route to do that. Okay, so if they are grouped up or they're on bait or they're on like with white bass schools, crankbaits are absolutely king. As far as color selection, water's dirty, your chartreuse is like this mustard, hot mustard color. If the water's cleaner, your green gizzards, your disco shads, those are the ones that I'm, more shad colors. Citrus shad's probably my favorite offshore color, cranking color in the summertime, but that is definitely it. As far as rods, like I make a rod in my series, is a 7.6 cranking rod. This is actually my 7.2. You don't have to have a specific offshore cranking rod. Now, if you do like to fish that way, then I would recommend you trying to maybe looking and investing in getting a little bit longer rod where you can make those longer casts and cover more water. But you can crank with your shallow cranking rod just as much as you can deep. It gets a little bit tougher when you get up in crankbait size, into like a 16 or a 20, because it's a bigger profile crankbait. You might even need to, maybe go with your 7.3 medium heavy, to maybe offset some of that. But again, if you're looking, you don't have to buy a rod specifically for it, but if you are looking to do it a lot and you enjoy that way of fishing, then you might want to look at investing in a deeper cranking rod, one that's a little bit longer where you can get the longer cast and it can handle those bigger baits. So that is definitely something right there. Now, as far as where am I going to be throwing this crankbait, this is a great look to sort of give you an idea. A lot of these places, you got to imagine these bass are spawning in this creek arm right here, okay? So the first place I'm gonna look at, okay, let me think here. Okay, the bass are all spawned here. There's a nice little point right there, extends out off it. It's inside the creek. That would be a place that I would first look at. Okay, that's gonna be a great shad spawn place, and it's gonna be a great place that out here towards the tip of this point, there should be some bass that are going out there and starting to group up, because again, they're spawning back there first. Now, where do I think, okay, now that it meets the main channel, anywhere there's real steep contours, these places right here. This is a deeper spot right here. It's 18 foot up on top. That's where I'm gonna be throwing like a DT20. Those fish, if they made it all the way out there, if they hadn't, they might be on some of these points. This is like a 12-foot point, and this is a shallower point. This is a great progression. It shows you right here. 4-foot bar, 12, 13, 14-foot point, and then down to a deeper, a 20-foot deep point. These are like the depth zones of like you might have to figure out what kind of depth they're in. And if you can figure out what depth your fish are in at this given time of year, that'll help you sort of find the next group of fish. And I will graph around and look for these groups of fish with my electronics, but you also can go old school and just crank around and fish and try to find that group by throwing a crankbait and find them. I found several schools throughout the years just fishing down points and you catch a couple nice fish in between that you never knew that you would never graphed, right? So there is some fun to it, just finding and looking for that group of fish, because there's times you won't be able to graph those fish. So that's it for the crankbait, but definitely one. I'm throwing typically 12-pound line on this, and then I do end up going with a 6-8 to 1 gear ratio or a 6-2 to 1 gear ratio cranking reel. That's what I like. Okay, so now that we've gotten through that, I got to go with the good old trusty Nico worm. You got to have a finesse tactic for the month of May because they can be sort of fickle at times. So right here we have a little stick worm, one that was not out quite yet, but it's one that definitely catches them. So that being said, one of my favorite hooks for a Nico worm is a 1/0 VMC Redline. This is actually a weedless one. So if you're around some stuff, just a little bit of cover, I like to add that weedless. I do like a 1/0 as well when I get to a bigger profile worm, because I just feel like at the end of the day, your hookup ratio, you don't want to, it's always this battle of like, can the fish see it? Is it too big? Is it too little? But if I want the biggest hook that I can get away with, and that's why I select that 1/0, because I feel like it's sort of the happy medium. So right now I have this, the VMC crossover ring. I put this on that worm. It's actually a band. It comes like, let me look in here actually. They have these little openings like right here, these little side compartments, and you just put it on the worm. It's like basically a new and improved band that allows, you just put that on there, boom, you stick it on your worm, and then it has this little nub that has a chamber going horizontal, and then it has a chamber going like cross, what it would be called? Vertical, horizontal, like perpendicular would be the correct. So basically, for this particular scenario, like if I'm going weightless, I'm gonna go across the worm, okay? And I'm not so sure I'm correct on this because I feel like sometimes this is probably the best, maybe sometimes all the time. I don't know. I got to start playing with this. It's something that Adrian and I sort of had a conversation on. Just maybe if you go that way, sometimes it just sort of your hookup ratio is good. But for right now, a lot of the fish and a lot of the big money that I've won has been going parallel with the worm, like so. Hook point up towards the tip of the tail, and then you're going to put a nail weight in the bottom. The cool thing about a Nico, and the reason why I picked and selected a Nico worm, a Nico weighted worm for the month of May, is you can fish this offshore and you can fish this shallow. So I have Nico weights right here. These are 3/32 ounce lead weights. These are the VMCs. And I can put this guy on here just like so. A lot of times what I'll do is if I'm fishing shallow, I'll cut this guy in half. Pop him in half. Now it's got about a 1/16. Boom. Pop him in there. And you're good to go. So you cast it out there and then it falls like so, hits the bottom, and you shake it, it hits the bottom, shake it, doop. One thing I will say, when you get a bite on a Nico worm, a lot of times I like to let the fish have it. They don't have hands, we know that, I get it. Like my dad told me, boy, they ain't got no hands. They ain't got no hands, set the hook. You know, I mean, you know how it is, but I do like to let the fish get the worm a little bit longer because, you know, when they grab it, a lot of times they'll grab the back of it, then they grab the bait, then they get a hold of it, and then it gets turned in their mouth, and then you reel down, follow through, set the hook, you got it. So that's my personal recommendation. Now, I'm not saying sit there for 30 seconds and give it to them. I'm saying I normally count to about 5, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, zzz, lock up right in the roof of the mouth. Now, if you have a hard time detecting your bites, you might want to set the hook for when you feel it. But if I know I feel that initial bite, tick tick, 1, 2, 3. Another thing to look at is which way is the fish swimming. Whichever way that fish is swimming, setting the hook the opposite way is going to give you a better hookup ratio. Definitely something to pay attention to, which allows you to sort of the best anglers I've watched set the way they set the hook. Like Greg Hatton, he puts a lot of time and effort into it. I've always learned a lot from watching Greg. He pitches out there, fish bites his bait, he starts swimming to the left, he sets the hook across his body to the right, which, you know, ends up hooking the fish, technically should hook the fish better, right? So that being said, 3/32 ounce VMC nail weights is what I throw a lot of times. I'll cut them down. Now, if you want to get it a little deeper, the VMC half moon heads, these are not for skipping, okay? These aren't for fishing shallow, but fishing a little bit deeper, or it's a 3/16 or an 1/8. I'll stick that and I'll super glue that into the bottom of the worm, like so. Now you can fish that offshore. It gets down there super deep, fast. I mean, you can fish it 20, 30, 40 feet deep, no problem. So I throw these a lot of times when I'm trying to fish it offshore and I want to get it down there. There's a lot of current, stuff like that. That's what I'm going to do. Okay, now where am I going to, well, hold on, let me see here. Hold on, y'all. Rod reel line, 7. This is my 7-1 medium heavy right here. Ooh, I'm about to crack the screen. Eesh. 7-1 medium action, actually. I personally, 10 pounds Suffix Advanced Fluorocarbon. This is a new line actually out at ICAST. You guys know I'm always trying. I love that nano braid though. Nano braid is my favorite on a spin rod. So that is what that is. That is the Nico. But I'm gonna tell you guys real quick here, just showing you some of the areas I'm gonna focus on utilizing that Nico worm. So for the late spawners, I'm gonna focus on some of these shallower points like so, some of these flats, some of the docks. Some of docks are great places for post spawners this time of year when the sun gets up. That Nico worm, the same fish that were on the Shad Spawn, they sort of get to the bottom. Great way to fish for that. Even in the backs to pockets, I'll fish that. The bluegill spawn starts to happen in the bass that don't go offshore. Don't worry, you can still catch those fish shallow, fishing, you know, in the backs of pockets and places like that because the bluegill spawn happens as well. And then, of course, offshore, the same places I'm going to throw my crankbait. If I feel like I find a group of fish on that DT10 or a DT20, that's when I'm going to pick up that Nico and cast it back out there on those places. When they stop biting a moving bait, that's when I'm going to drag around them and throw that Nico and I'm going to generate those bites. So that is it for the Nico, but it's a great way to catch a lot of fish, and I've actually won a lot of money over the years utilizing that technique. It's phenomenal. Last but not least, it could not be the month of May. I'm sorry, guys, you got to bring it out. Is the Gizzard Shad Freeloader 3/16. You guys already know it. Actually, there was just a tournament here on Chickamauga. Shout out to Bank Shaw, young angler that just broke the Toyota Series records, 3-day record, with winning weight over 25 pounds over second place. I mean, absolutely killed it. And he caught a lot of his fish on a freeloader. The thing about a freeloader is it just catches a lot of fish. Now, before I get into the freeloader aspect, I want to say one more thing. I met Banks a long time ago at a local tournament in a local little Thursday nighter, and he was like 15, 16 years old. Had a lot of really enjoyed bass fishing. You could tell he had the itch, and he was a really good fisherman. He won a lot of those 3-fish tournaments, and I thought it was really cool to see him. Now, I think 20 years old, hoisting the trophy, having a phenomenal week. That's really cool for me to see, because I feel like I've been there before, and seeing that, that's cool. That is cool. So congratulations to you, man. That's awesome. But yeah, caught a lot of fish on a freeloader, and the freeloader is absolutely actually back in stock in a lot of places. I know Academy just had these back in stock in green and gizzard shad, so I don't know how many are available. I'll try to drop a link. I'm hoping they're still in stock at this moment. I'm going to drop a link if at all possible. So I'm hoping they're still there when we drop this video. We'll see. So that being said, just a good size profile. Those fish and I think that's the one thing that people don't understand necessarily with a freeloader is they think that you have to use a freeloader with your electronics. And that's the furthest thing from the truth. I throw this bait a lot. If you look at Dale Hollow video, I was fishing it down bluff walls. I was fishing it, you can fish it around docks, you can fish it around rocks, you can fish it around bluff walls, you can fish it around on points. You got to imagine this as a new swim bait of sorts. Now, it's a little bit slower. It's not necessarily the best bait for covering a ton of water because it is a little bit slower than a swim bait, but if you're trying to generate a bite, the freeloader is phenomenal at generating bites. So, that being said, I really like this bait a lot, and the whole key with this is I'm throwing a 3/16 ounce VMC. This is a finesse, swim bait, a finesse hybrid swim bait jig is what it is. I think it's what it is. The finesse hybrid swim bait jig. I'm almost positive. I just tie it on. And the cool thing about this one, it does have a screw lock. I know they're still hard to get, but that screw lock in there really keeps that bait on there, and it really allows for you to get more fish per a bait. And that's where I'm always recommending that. Now, if you want to get down to the nitty gritty, you can tie if you want a little bit more action, you can tie a loop knot. And so I'm gonna go ahead, tie this loop knot for y'all. I'll just put a loop in there. I was a little bit worried about a loop knot this year. I've actually caught several fish at Dale Hollow on it, but I don't really throw a loop knot on any baits that are over 3/8 because I don't feel like I'm getting the action that I really need out of it. So I'm rotating around there 3 times. It might be a little bit big of a loop knot, but he's about right. So loop knot, the whole key for a loop knot is to give it more swinging freedom. Okay, so that being said, this is the whole action that I'm looking for in a freeloader. I'm gonna tell you guys this real quick here, is this rocking action, okay? So it's this bait going side to side, right? And so what you're doing is you're shaking that bait and you're throwing slack back at it, right? Bop, 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 bop. If the bait does not have slack, so you gotta imagine I'm shake, 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 shake. I'm throwing slack back at that bait. So that allows that bait to go left, right, left, right, left, right. If I keep tension on that, and I'm just keeping it tension on that line, it has no room to do that. And shake, it's gonna go up, 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 up. and then you're not going to get the rocking action. So you have to learn that technique is just shake, 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 shake. You're throwing your line, you're pulling it, then you're throwing slack at it. So you almost got to imagine it as like walking a frog, okay? When you walk a frog, think about this. You pull it, and then you give it slack to where it can glide. You pull it, and you give it slack so it can glide. Same sort of mindset with a freeloader. Pop it upward, turn, 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 but it's a faster action. Bop, 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 bop. And then all of a sudden it's a pressure bite. There he is. Zzz, got it. So that's really the key. This rod right here has been my absolute favorite for this technique, the 7.0 medium action rod for my original signature series. They're available at the Academy as well. The 2500 Vanford 8-pound nano braid, 10-pound Sepix Advanced fluorocarbon leader. Can't go wrong with this setup. Absolutely phenomenal for this system. And it just the key is if you have a rod in your boat or in your boat or at your house, softer tip is what you want. A little softer tip. So that's what I'm going to recommend right there. And that's the deal. So now as far as where I'm going to throw this guy, about everywhere. I mean, a freeloader, I mean, you can't go wrong with it. Just try it. I'm telling you, cut your electronics off and go throw it for 1 hour. Just go throw it on a lake that you know there's fish around and see what they bite. I'm just telling you, it works phenomenal when you see them on electronics too. Don't get me wrong, absolutely great, but it is a bait. Do not pigeonhole this bait to just utilizing them with electronics, because it is way more than that, and you're gonna see what I'm talking about. So where am I gonna throw it? Same place. If I'm finding the schools of fish, same school of fish that I found on a crankbait, I'll throw a freeloader, of course. But also not limited to docks, looking for places if they're getting weird, you know, if the water's a little clear on your shad spawn, freeloaders will probably work better than a chatterbait and a spinnerbait. Okay, so that's probably a pretty good, yep, it's gonna work a little bit better. Bluff walls, just going down the bluff wall, shaking it down the bluff wall. Suspended fish, I like to get up there, eat shad, same thing, post spawners. That's really my mindset, sort of the same as them in the same places that I'm throwing a lot of other stuff. They're moving back out of the creeks, they're trying to get to the main river, and those are the areas that I'm going to target for the month of May. So hopefully you guys learned something in this video. Give me your, like just sort of like last time, really appreciate everybody, all the love. I try to give you guys tidbits, at least a couple really good ones every single baits of the month. I try to give you something that's just a little bit, just a little tidbit that I feel like I would appreciate if I was watching this. And so hopefully you did get something out of that. If you did, drop a comment below. Let me know what your favorite thing is. Again, if you're watching at this point in time, I appreciate you all. I really do. If you watch the whole video, I really appreciate that. It means a lot to me. Because I try to do these things because I want people to learn. I want people to catch more fish. And that's what it's all about. So I know that for me, that's a big thing. And so it really means a lot for everybody who's watching this video right now. Thank you. And we will see you on the next one. See ya.